You blink. Another morning. Same alarm. Same ceiling. Same thoughts you didn't ask for. You drag your body into motion, not because you want to, but because it's what comes next. You check your phone, notifications, updates, nothing real. You eat the same food you barely taste. You get dressed in clothes that don't feel like yours. You walk through the same doors, say the same words, nod at the same people. You play your part well. You're not failing, you're not breaking, but you're not living either. You're just continuing, like a machine set on loop, efficient, predictable, empty. You smile when required. You laugh when expected. You talk, but none of it feels like it came from you. And maybe, just maybe, you've started to notice. Not in some dramatic way, not like the movies, but in the quiet, in the spaces between tasks, in that pause before bed where something inside you whispers, "This can't be it." And maybe you've tried to drown it out, with work, with noise, with goals, but it keeps returning, that soft, heavy ache that says, you've been awake, but never alive. And the scariest part? No one else seems to notice. Everyone around you looks fine, so you wonder if you're broken, if you're the only one faking it. But what if you're not broken? What if you're just one of the few who still remembers what it feels like to be real? And what if that ache isn't weakness, but the beginning of something? Something you were never meant to forget. You weren't always like this. You used to feel things, deeply, loudly, without apology. You cried when you were sad. You laughed when you were joyful. You questioned everything. But then came the lessons. Not from books, but from reactions. A sigh when you were too loud. A frown when you asked too much. A warning glance when your emotions got too big. So you adapted. You smiled when you were supposed to. You sat still when you wanted to run. You said, "I'm fine," before you even knew what that meant. Somewhere between report cards and performance reviews, you learned that being good meant being less of yourself. That quiet was praised more than truth. That obedience felt safer than curiosity. And slowly, piece by piece, you traded feeling for functioning. You became efficient at being acceptable. You learned how to survive the room, not how to take up space in it. And that survival, it looked like success. People called you mature, responsible, easy to be around. But inside, you were folding, collapsing into a version of you that made others comfortable, but left you empty. And now you can barely remember who came before the mask, the real you, the wild one, the loud one, the sensitive one. Where did they go? You buried them under layers of should and must and don't be dramatic. And you called it growing up. But maybe that wasn't growth. Maybe that was the beginning of the forgetting, the slow fading of the parts of you that were inconvenient, but true. And maybe that's where the numbness began. Not all at once, but moment by moment, until one day you woke up and realized you're not sad, not happy, not even angry, just nothing. A smooth, polished nothing that never makes trouble. A version of you that everyone seems to like, except the part of you that still remembers how to feel. You follow the plan. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. You tell yourself this is just a phase, until the phase becomes your life. You answer emails faster than questions in your own head. You move through rooms like a shadow with a calendar. You say yes before checking in with your body. Somewhere along the way you stopped choosing. You started executing. You became a function of expectation, and everyone applauded your consistency. Reliable, they called you. Put together. But deep down, something in you started to twitch. Because this isn't momentum, it's autopilot. It's existing without agency. It's motion without meaning. Heidegger called it das Man, the they self. The part of you that lives according to others. The voice that says, everyone does it. This is how it's supposed to be, just keep going. And you obey, not because you believe, but because resisting would require a kind of presence you haven't practiced in years. You scroll through life like it's content. You manage moments like they're meetings. Even your dreams sound like corporate objectives, stable, scalable, realistic. And Nietzsche saw this too. He said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But what if your why was handed to you? What if you're just bearing the how without ever choosing the why? You move forward, but you don't remember deciding to. You build a life, but it doesn't feel like yours. You're living on rails laid down by someone else, efficient, safe, unquestioned. And the scariest part? It works. You can run a life like this for decades, only occasionally feeling that strange flicker, a memory of freedom, a taste of being human before the system kicked in, a moment when you weren't productive, but you were real. And maybe that's the first question worth asking again. Who's doing the living here, me or the version of me that was trained to never stop? You don't remember the last time you truly felt anything, not like before. Not that sharp kind of joy that makes you lose your breath, not the grief that splits you open. Now everything's muted, manageable, painless. You smile when you're supposed to, you nod in agreement even when nothing moves you. You say, "That's exciting," but your chest stays still. You say, "I'm exhausted," but you don't feel tired, just drained. Like your body is working, but your spirit has gone offline. And people tell you, at least you're stable, as if stability were the goal. But what they really mean is, you're not too much, not too loud, not too sad, not too passionate. You're easy to be around because you've quieted your fire. You've sanded down your soul so nothing pokes through. But emotions were never meant to be flattened. They were meant to guide, to warn, to awaken. Camus called it the absurd, that ache between what we feel and the silence of the world. He said, there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Not always literal, but the slow suicide of feeling nothing in a world that demands everything. And Sartre, he warned that when we give up our freedom to feel, we surrender the only thing that made us human. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself, he said. But what if we've stopped making anything? What if we've become templates, safe, consistent, emotionally neutral templates, living pre-approved lives with pre-filtered feelings? You don't cry anymore, but you also don't laugh the way you used to. You don't break, but you don't bloom either. You just continue. As if being numb were noble, as if being pleasant were a kind of enlightenment. But deep down, something remembers, something rebels. And sometimes, in the middle of your stillness, a single tear appears. Not because you're sad, but because your soul is trying to remind you. You're still in there. You think you made your choices, the school you went to, the job you applied for, the life you built. But how many of those were truly yours? How many were designed for you long before you could say no? From the start, you were handed a script. Be polite, follow rules. Don't ask too many questions. Be impressive but not intimidating. Be smart but not disruptive. Be likable above all. And so you obeyed, not out of fear, but because disobedience meant being alone, being strange, being left out. Michel Foucault wrote that the most effective form of control isn't chains or violence. It's when power becomes invisible, when you start policing yourself. And that's what society did. It taught you to monitor your voice, your body, your dreams, to be reasonable, professional, normal. And what they meant was predictable, contained, safe. You learned how to blend in at school, to suppress your curiosity when it didn't fit the curriculum. You learned how to sit for hours, not because you wanted to, but because that's how good students behaved. Then came the workplace, where success meant silence, where you were rewarded for endurance, not imagination, where questioning the system made you a problem, not a pioneer, and family, where love sometimes came with conditions, where being yourself meant risking affection, where "that's just how we do things" ended every real conversation. Rousseau said, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." But no one told you the chains would be made of compliments and likes, of performance reviews and polite dinners, of applause that felt hollow and acceptance that required a costume. Alain de Botton once said, "The desire to be liked is often stronger than the desire to be understood." And so, you chose to be liked, over and over again, until being liked became who you are. But now, somewhere inside you, there's a friction, a part of you that's tired of being manageable, a part that doesn't want to fit in, but wants to exist fully. even if it cost you the approval you were trained to chase. And maybe that's the beginning, not of rebellion, but of remembering. You've become someone they admire, someone who gets things done, someone who says the right words, wears the right clothes, knows how to be just enough. But somewhere in the making of that person, you disappeared. Not in a dramatic way. You didn't vanish, you diluted. Piece by piece, choice by choice. You learned what worked, what got approval, what made things easier, and you built yourself around that, around utility, around survival. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to navigate society. Not evil, not false, just partial. A costume worn so long, you forget there's a face beneath it. And Erich Fromm warned us too. He said we become what we think we should be, that identity in the modern world is often built on expectation, not essence. And the result? A person who functions well but feels nothing. You look in the mirror and see a version of yourself that works, but it doesn't resonate. There's no intimacy in your own reflection, no familiarity, just performance, just a role. And the scariest part? It's so convincing. You've played it so long, others believe it, you believe it. Until something cracks. A word, a silence, a breakdown that doesn't look like falling apart, but like finally seeing the truth. Soren Kierkegaard once said, "The greatest despair is to be oneself, and yet not to will it, to be another than oneself." And now maybe you feel that despair, not loudly, but quietly, like a slow dissolve of color from your soul. You don't feel broken, you feel miscast, like you've been acting in a film written by someone else. And maybe that's the beginning, not of collapse, but of revision, of walking back into yourself, not to destroy the version that helped you survive, but to meet, maybe for the first time, the version that knows how to live. You've said it so many times, you don't even notice it anymore. I'm fine, I'm good, it's nothing. And maybe, at first, it was just politeness. A way to keep things simple, to move past the question and get on with your day. But over time, it became something else. A shield, a spell, a script. You smile while something inside you sinks. You laugh on cue, even when your chest feels like it's caving in. You reply with exclamation points while your spirit whispers in parentheses. And the worst part? You've said it so often you almost believe it. That you're okay, that this is normal, that the heaviness you carry isn't real because no one else seems to notice. Martin Heidegger called it idle talk. The kind of shallow language we use that keeps us floating on the surface of life, never diving into meaning. You've learned how to perform this talk fluently, how to protect others from your truth, how to protect yourself from having to face it. Simone de Beauvoir wrote about the trap of politeness, of how women especially are taught to be agreeable even when they are breaking. But this isn't just about gender, this is about survival. Franz once said that the oppressed sometimes adopt the language of their oppressor. In your case, your oppressor is numbness. And its language is, I'm fine, but you're not fine. You're exhausted, you're isolated, you're stretched thin between who you are and who you pretend to be. And the real tragedy is not that you lie to others, it's that you lie to yourself, that you've mistaken coping for healing, endurance for peace, distraction for joy. And now, the silence inside you is growing louder, the smile no longer fits your face. The words you speak feel distant, like someone else's voice in your own mouth. And maybe, just maybe, that's the first truth you've said in a long time. This isn't fine, not even close. Everything looks fine. You're doing well by every measurable standard. The job is steady, the conversations are polite, your calendar is full, your notifications endless. But deep inside, there's this absence, a hollow you can't explain. You're not crying, you're not breaking, you're just unmoved, unshaken, unfeeling. You go through the motions like a ghost, trying to remember what it felt like to be human. You laugh, but it doesn't rise from your chest. You achieve things, but they land like pebbles in a bottomless well. And this is the part no one talks about, the kind of pain that leaves no mark, the kind that's invisible to others but relentless to you. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of this. He said when you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. But what if the abyss isn't external? What if it's inside, silent, soft, and constant? Albert Camus described the absurd as waking up each day, performing life's rituals, while secretly knowing they mean nothing. Rising, tram, 4 hours of work, lunch, 4 hours of work, tram, sleep, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This isn't drama, it's erosion. It's not screaming, it's forgetting what it ever felt like to care. Arthur Schopenhauer once said that desire is a flame, but satisfaction is brief, and after it comes the void. You get what you want, and still nothing stirs, not joy, not relief, just another checkbox ticked, another breath exhaled in silence. You're not in pain. You're in pause, the kind of pause that stretches endlessly with no promise of a next scene. And the world doesn't notice because you're still showing up, still smiling, still fine. But beneath it all, something in you knows this isn't stability. This is slow death. This is what it feels like to survive in a life that never touches your soul. And the longer you stay in it, the more you forget there was ever anything else. It doesn't start with a breakdown, not with tears, not with screaming. It starts with a question, quiet, sudden, disruptive. What am I doing? Who am I doing this for? You're brushing your teeth, answering an email, waiting at a traffic light, and the question hits, not like thunder, but like a crack in glass. You pause, just for a moment. But that pause is everything. Because something in you just refused to go on without asking. And that refusal, that tiny act of rebellion, is the beginning, the first sign that you're waking up. Rousseau said, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. But chains rust. And sometimes one weak link breaks. Sometimes you feel a memory of yourself, a voice that hasn't spoken in years. And it says, this isn't it. Not in anger, but in clarity." Friedrich Nietzsche believed awakening begins when we stop accepting handed-down values, when we dare to reevaluate everything we were told was good, right, or necessary. That's what's happening now. You're not collapsing, you're questioning, and that's sacred. You're beginning to see the system, the mask, the false comfort for what they are. Temporary shelters, not homes. And Martin Heidegger wrote that true being begins only when we confront our mortality, when we stop assuming there's time to wait. That moment, the one you're in right now, that pause is not weakness, it's the spark, the beginning of authorship, the moment you shift from actor to writer. And maybe it's terrifying, maybe it feels like too little too late, but it's not. This is how every revolution begins, not with an army, but with a single, private refusal to keep living a lie. So if you've asked the question even once, even in silence, celebrate it. Don't run from it. That question is a door. And behind it is the life you haven't met yet. No one tells you this part, that waking up hurts, that the moment you start questioning, everything begins to unravel. The routines that once gave you comfort now feel like cages. The people you used to laugh with feel distant. Even your own voice sounds unfamiliar. You start noticing the cracks in conversations, the hollowness in your habits, the quiet grief in places that once felt safe. And you think, something's wrong, that maybe you're broken. But this isn't damage, it's deconstruction. It's what happens when the shell begins to crack. Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." This chaos you feel, it's not failure, it's potential. Still raw, still wild, but alive. You're not losing your mind, you're shedding everything that was never really yours. And yes, it feels like falling, like losing your grip on everything you once trusted. But maybe those things were never solid to begin with. Albert Camus said, "Freedom is nothing but a chance to be better." And freedom, real freedom, doesn't feel light. It feels heavy. Because now, for the first time, you're responsible for your own meaning. There's no script, no map, just you. And that's terrifying, but it's also sacred. Heraclitus believed that nothing stays still, that all things flow, transform, evolve. And you, too, are transforming. That ache in your chest, it's not emptiness, it's expansion. The pain you feel is not a sign to retreat, it's a signal that something deeper is waking, something ancient, something real. So, if you feel lost right now, unsure, afraid, good. That means you're not asleep. That means the old skin is cracking. And what comes next may not be easy, but it will be true. And sometimes truth begins not with clarity, but with collapse. You got a glimpse, just one, of the truth, of the weightlessness behind the mask, of the hollowness behind the structure. And for a moment, everything felt raw and terrifying and real. And then you pulled back. You told yourself it was a bad day. You scrolled, you shopped, you smiled again. Because stepping out of the system feels like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark. No path, no guarantee, just air and questions. Slavoj Žižek said it clearly. People do not really want freedom, they just want a better master. And maybe that's what the system offers, a familiar master, a predictable loop, a discomfort you've learned how to live with. True freedom? It asks more of you. It doesn't come with instructions. It comes with silence, with solitude, with the burden of choosing for yourself. And Simone de Beauvoir warned us, to be free is not to have power, but to be vulnerable. That vulnerability, that openness to pain, to uncertainty, to rejection, is what sends most people running back. Back to the checklist, back to the noise, back to the version of themselves that doesn't feel, but at least functions. And you know what? That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Because this isn't just about courage. It's about capacity. It's about timing. It's about the fact that sometimes choosing comfort feels like survival. But here's the truth. Every time you return to the old life, it fits a little less. Every time you try to forget, something in you remembers louder. That ache, that question, that flicker of who you were before you stopped asking why. Ivan Illich once wrote that modern institutions don't need to chain you, they just need to keep you comfortable enough not to notice you're in a cage. And maybe now you've noticed. Maybe now the cage doesn't feel like home anymore. And that, in itself, is progress. So if you've gone back before, if you're tempted to go back now, don't hate yourself for it. Don't call it failure. Call it rehearsal, because not everyone gets it right the first time, or the second. What matters isn't how many times you return to sleep. What matters is that you keep waking up, even if just for a moment, even if just long enough to remember there's more than this. And you've already seen it. You tried. You really did. You told yourself it was a phase. You went back to the rhythm, to the tasks, to the small talk and safe answers. You smiled, you nodded, you picked up the old mask and wore it like armor. But something had changed. The life you used to move through without friction now rubs against you like sandpaper. The words feel hollow, the patterns feel off, and the scariest part is no one else seems to notice because they never saw the shift. But you did. And once you've seen the truth, even just once, the lie can never feel like home again. Franz Kafka wrote, "You are free, and that is why you are lost." And now you understand. You are free, but that freedom comes with a kind of ache. The ache of watching the world keep turning even though you can no longer walk with it the same way. Heidegger spoke of Geworfenheit, the sense of being thrown into existence, without a manual, without a script. That's what this feels like you've been tossed out of the performance, and now you're standing backstage, seeing how it was all built. You're not in the role anymore, you're in the raw. And yes, it's lonely, because real freedom doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence, with empty rooms, with dinners where your words fall flat because you're no longer playing along. Søren Kierkegaard said that despair ends when we accept that we're no longer who we were pretending to be. And that's where you are now. Not broken, just done pretending. And while it may feel like you've lost something, the truth is, you finally stopped losing yourself. So if it feels like you don't belong anywhere right now, that's okay. You're not meant to fit into a world that required your numbness to keep you around. You're meant to step beyond it, to build something new. And yes, the beginning of that newness may be quiet, it may be lonely, but it's yours. And that makes all the difference. You're standing in the ruins. The mask is gone, the routine shattered, the version of you that made everything easier for everyone else. It's no longer sustainable. And now comes the hardest part. Not the collapse, the creation. You're not rebuilding to return. You're building forward. And it's strange, because no one gave you blueprints. No one told you how to be yourself. You have to learn it, like a language you used to speak as a child but forgot to use. One feeling at a time, one truth at a time, one breath at a time. Nietzsche wrote, "Become who you are, not discover, become." Because the real you isn't buried under the rubble. The real you is the one who picks up the pieces and decides what stays. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." That means there is no final version of you, only versions you choose to make more honest, more awake, more alive. And yes, it's overwhelming. Some days you'll want to crawl back into roles you've outgrown. Some nights you'll ache for the numbness that used to protect you. But don't mistake discomfort for the wrong path. Growth is not a clean process. It's messy, confusing, quiet. But it's also sacred, because this time, you're not building from fear. You're building from desire, from memory, from longing. Immanuel Kant said that freedom is not doing whatever you want, it's giving law to yourself. And now, for the first time, you get to decide what matters. What's worthy of your time? What's true in your bones? You get to say, I want this, not because it's expected, but because it feels like mine. That's how a life is made, not found. Made. So be patient with yourself. You're not late. You're not lost. You're building something no one else can. A life that actually fits the shape of your soul. You've been breathing this whole time. Heart beating, eyes open, tasks completed. Life, by all definitions, has been happening, but deep down you know. That's not the same as being alive, because being alive isn't just surviving the day. It's showing up for it. It's feeling the sharp edges and the soft moments. It's choosing, not just reacting. Thomas Merton said, "The biggest human temptation is to settle for too little, and too many do. They call a half-life good enough and forget that they were born with the capacity to burn. You weren't made to just function. You were made to feel, to want, to hurt, to reach. Living hurts sometimes, yes, but so does the alternative, the ache of never trying, the ache of silence where your voice should be." Viktor Frankl said, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." That's what it comes down to, meaning, not ease, not safety, but something inside you that says, this matter, this moment, this effort, this connection. That's aliveness, not the curated version, not the performance, but the messy, trembling, authentic kind. Heidegger warned us not to be observers of life, but to exist as part of the unfolding, not just stand on the sidelines. So now, maybe you begin to understand. Being alive is saying yes to this moment, even when it's uncertain. It's crying without apology. It's loving with risk. It's standing in your truth even when your voice shakes. It's asking, every day, not what is expected of me, but what is real in me. And if you can do that even once, then you're not just breathing anymore. You're here. You're alive. And that changes everything. To now, here you are, after everything, after the silence, the cracks, the chaos, the ache. After the mask fell, after you remembered the sound of your own voice, and now you face the question that was waiting the whole time. Will you go back? Back to the system, back to the script, back to the version of you that kept everyone comfortable except you. You could. No one would stop you. In fact, most people would applaud you for it, for being better, for being your old self again, but you're not your old self. Heraclitus said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river and he is not the same man." You've changed, maybe quietly, maybe painfully, but undeniably. And going back now wouldn't feel like safety, it would feel like self-betrayal. Nietzsche reminded us, there are no facts, only interpretations. What matters now is how you choose to interpret this moment, as an ending or as a threshold. Carl Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. So the question is no longer what happened to you. It's what will you do with it? Will you carry your awakening like a burden or like a compass? Will you use what broke you to break open? You don't need to be fearless. You don't need to be ready. You just need to be honest. Because awakening isn't an event. It's a practice, a path. A lifelong, breath by breath return to your truth. And maybe no one will understand. Maybe it'll be quiet, but it'll be yours, and that is the beginning of everything. So now, not Sunday, now ask yourself, will you go back to sleep, or will you choose again and again to live awake?